Hello and welcome, dear listeners, to episode 128 of The Reformed Gamers, the show all about theology, video games, looking out for your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and anything else that we can think of. I'm your Spider-Pig host, Logan.
I am his co-host, Adam.
And I'm his guest host, Micah.
So, dear listeners, for the first time in like a month, you get me, you get Adam, and you get a special guest host on here, all in one episode. It's like a long time coming. It's good to have the team back together. Like a bunch of Spider-Man characters from different universes coming together to talk about video games, to talk about theology. That's what this episode is going to be. In case you didn't notice, from the title of the episode, from the cover art from the episode, that's really it. We're going to be talking about Spider-Man on the PS4 this episode. So as per usual, later on in the show, we'll mark a point that says, spoilers. So if you don't want the game spoiled, that's your opportunity to tune out. But until then, you're in safe territory. You are in safe territory. But before we get into the show, a little bit of housekeeping brought to you by Dear VIP Luke Strain over at patreon.com/thereformedgamers. Thank you, sir, for your support. We got to do... words. We have to announce the winner of the Spider-Man photo contest. A couple episodes ago, we announced that we were doing a Spider-Man photo contest, so you can take pictures of you playing Spider-Man, of your adventures through the city. Send those to us with the hashtag TRG Spider-Man. We got some entries in, a lot of great entries, but came down to one particular photo that we were like, that's it. And that photo, the photo that won is, I'm really butchering this, guys. I'm out of fuel and I'm trying to keep going. But the winner of the Spider-Man photo contest is Mark Fromme. Good sir, you are the winner of the $20 PlayStation gift card. We will be reaching out to you to send that to you, and your, in case you haven't noticed, your picture is the cover art of this episode. So there you go, man. Enjoy that. Thank you for the cover art. Hope you enjoy that $20 PlayStation gift card. I gotta say, way too many games out right now that I want to play and have no time to play. I know we were talking about that pre-show, me and Adam were, and Micah, I don't know if you got into that with Adam when I ducked out. It's just insane. Mark of the Ninja Remastered came out today, the day that we're recording. Chasm is coming out on the Switch in a couple weeks. You got Guacamelee out on the Switch, so if you guys have never played that, there you go. Call of Duty comes out this week, which I know like people listening are like, oh, Call of Duty, I'm playing Fortnite. Whatever. I'm going to be playing Call of Duty. I'm excited for it. It's a crazy time. You got Assassin's Creed Odyssey. You got Red Dead at the end of the month. Dude, no time to play these games. No time.
Ain't nobody got time.
Ain't nobody got time for that. And yet here I am getting platinum trophies in games when I really have no time, which is a good segue into what have you been playing, brought to you by Richard Marroquin. Micah, good sir, since you are the guest of honor in the rotating third chair, man, what have you been up to in the world of gaming? What have you been playing?
Well, other than Spider-Man, I've been playing a lot of that, obviously, but looking for a game between Spider-Man and Red Dead, trying to fill that gap, and I came across Hollow Knight.
Great game.
Of course, everyone's been talking about it most of the summer, I guess. It's been a Switch darling this summer, but I picked that up on PS4, the Void Heart Edition, and I've been digging into that about 7-8 hours or so. I don't know. That game's real good. Everyone's right. I'm not really going to say anything new about it that hasn't already been said, but really just I'm enjoying the exploration of it, just getting to know the maps and finding these nook and crannies and different secrets or different enemies or whatever. So just kind of exploring around. I like the sort of the Souls-like risk and reward sort of stuff of having to keep your money, and if you die you got to go back and get it. So yeah, really enjoying Hollow Knight. Very beautiful soundtrack, beautiful art. So playing that right now. Have either of y'all played that?
I have not.
That's actually what I'm playing. Not like literally right now, but like I'll get to later. I'm in the middle of a platinum trophy hunt, and I would have the platinum trophy, but I keep going back to Hollow Knight on the Switch because it's so good. Yeah, it's good. I mean, I got one particular upgrade that has made the traversal in that game so much more fun now. And it's just, that's all I want to do. I just want to play Hollow Knight. So good.
Yeah. You start off real basic and you flesh out your various moveset and stuff. So that game's awesome. Also picked up Super Mario Party on the Switch.
Okay.
I've a big time Mario Party fan from I say back in the day. Never had any on N64, but on the GameCube era, like 4, 5, and 6, I love those. Played those with my dorm buddies back in college and stuff. So picked this up, playing it with the family. A lot of fun. It's probably one of the better Mario parties in recent memory, at least in my opinion. It's sort of back to that just fun formula of playing on the board. You don't have any of that train stuff anymore. All the mini games are really fun that I've come across so far. The only really kind of disappointing part about it, I was talking to Adam a little bit in the pre-show, is the sort of the lack of online support. You can play the mini games online, but you can't play the actual board mode, which is the meat of the game. You can't play that online.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, if I can't swoop in last second and steal a star from my friend, what is this all about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's weird.
I get that they want you to play on one screen. It's a Joy-Con game. They'd only let you play with a Pro Controller, I don't think. Like you got to use a Joy-Con.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. It's pretty locked down.
But it makes sense once you play with the Joy-Con. It makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's not
you really
thing when I say the Joy-Con.
Can't really play it with the Pro Controller.
Yeah, it's meant for the Joy-Con. So it's a lot of fun though. I'm having a blast with it. The kids are enjoying it. So yeah, that's what I've been playing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Adam, good sir, what have you been playing, you handsome bearded man?
Oof, dabbling as much as I can. Life hasn't really slowed down. Preaching went good. I think I mentioned that last episode that I'm getting a good look at that bivocational lifestyle. Every couple months of working kind of a full-time job, but also preparing sermons. And so I kind of understand my brother's. He's been bivocational for a long time, kind of get his life. And it's not one that I necessarily want to do every week, but went good. Grateful for that. Preached on Malachi chapter 1. That was fun. But I've been playing some Fortnite season 6. Bought my first ever season pass, or battle pass. So pretty excited about that. I'm kind of, it's changing the way I play. Like I'm now trying to do challenges, at least until I get enough of the V-Bucks to get the next season for free, which I don't necessarily like that because I just run around not really trying to win or even get kills. I'm just trying to do what the game's telling me to do. So that it is what it is, but still enjoy Fortnite, playing it a lot with students. Also, similar to Micah, playing some Super Mario Party. Got that, had some people over Friday night. And it's just, I'm an OGer. I've played Mario Party 1, 2, 3 on the 64. Played one or two of them on the GameCube. Then got the last one on the Wii U, which, like Micah said, was just straight up trash. So disappointing. But this one has got the old school feel to it. The boards, you're limited on the boards. There's only 4 different maps. So that's kind of, I'm hoping there's going to be some DLC at some point, adding some new boards. But same cutthroat, same kind of finagling around the board to be able to get different, the stars or items. They've added some cool things like allies, which make the game really interesting because you could be playing a mini game and you could have 2 allies with you in the mini game. So that makes it really interesting. It makes it it incentivizes kind of trying to get those. So that's been fun, but it's a return to the old school style of Mario Party, which I'm all about. Part of me thinks some of it's probably because of my age, haven't, it's slower, which isn't a bad thing. It's still, it's got that gives it that board game feel where you've got to roll the dice and everybody's got to do their turn. And you finally get into the middle game. So, me and my buddies just always yell at each other. Like if they waited like 2 seconds before they hit A, someone's yelling, push the button. Like, we're just trying to get to the next mini game. Like, come on, push the button. What are you waiting for? And so I was doing that with like my wife and my buddies. His wife was there and we were all playing. And I'm like, Carolyn, push the button. Carolyn, push the button. Because there's just like, I'm like, the screen's not going to move forward until you push the button.
It's like, move.
Nothing Toad is telling you is that important. Let me just tell you.
It's like me with my kids. That's how I felt.
Just push, yeah. But it's been a lot of fun. So we had a good time. And Hannah, even the other day, she's like, I'm like, hey, do you want to watch me play the next game on Detroit, Become Human? She's like, let's play Mario Party. I'm like, let's go. Yes. There's like a partner mode that you can play. And we played it on normal, and it was like, it was too easy. I think they literally ended with 1 star and 0 coins for like the entire game. So it was too easy. But so yeah, playing Mario Party, playing Fortnite, but been playing a ton. Well, not a ton. I'm over halfway through the story of Detroit Become Human. And man, this game is a ton of fun. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I'll play through it twice because when I play these games, kind of the first story I get, like that's kind of, and I know there's so many different arcs and so many different ways you can go, but like that's, when I've played through it once, like that's the game to me. Like I don't want to play it again. Like that's the memory I want to have. But there's so many different directions that you can go in this game that I feel like I need to. Because there was a point where like you've got 3 main characters, Marcus, Kara, and then Connor. Like I'm doing really good on Marcus and Kara, but I'm really struggling with the cop. Like I've got my partner irritated,
really
angry, but everyone else is like positive. So apparently I'm making a ton of really bad choices with the cop. There's one part where you get the option of like, there's multiple options where you can shoot or not shoot. And the most recent one I shot. And so like the effect of that, I'm just like, dang it. Like you can't rewind.
I know where you're
at.
Yeah.
My partner is real frustrated with me. But I feel like I'm making not bad choices. Like anytime I try to have a conversation with him, he just gets more angry at me. And I'm like, I'm just being real with you, bro. I'm like being honest, acting like a human. And he's just getting more and more ticked off about it. So
yeah, start acting like a robot, dude.
I'm crushing it with Kara. I'm crushing it with Marcus. But with him, I'm just struggle busting real hard. But the game, I mean, it looks great. It plays great. There's so many different arcs of dialogue and different directions you can go. I'm playing on like the story mode, so it's a lot harder to lose a character. But man, this game is fan. It's just another great PlayStation exclusive. I mean, if you've got a PlayStation and you liked anything from Until Dawn to Heavy Rain to Beyond Two Souls, this is a game that, I mean, it's a great, great story. And it deals with, there's some, what's the word I'm looking for? Some social commentary kind of going on between that game and kind of current cultural climate stuff. So there's a podcast episode in there somewhere.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely really enjoying this game. Again, I haven't finished it, but I think it's a game I can say go check it out.
Yeah, definitely.
Right on. I would agree with that. Had a lot of fun with the game. Little humble brag. I got the platinum trophy in it, so I mean that should tell you if the game's good or not. But as far as what I've been playing, and here's the thing. I'm at a point now in this whole podcast game thing where I literally forget everything I say after we turn the mics on and record and stuff. So if I've talked about Shadow of the Tomb Raider and beating that game already, I'm sorry. I don't remember it. But
you haven't, because I've been waiting to talk to you about it because I really want to play it.
Oh, okay. Well, hey, so I beat Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and how do I talk about this game without making it sound like I hated it? Because I didn't hate the game. Here's the thing. Rise of the Tomb Raider is a fantastic game. Playing through it right now, trying to get the platinum trophy on it. And after playing that again, after having played Shadow of the Tomb Raider, really shows how lesser of a game Shadow of the Tomb Raider is compared to Rise. The problem with Shadow of the Tomb Raider is that the story it's not consistent, I want to say. There's a point where the last third or the last half of the game just feels very rushed. Like, it's kind of like they were getting close to the deadline and they're like, hey, we really need to hurry this up. And so everything kind of wraps up very quickly, and there's still questions left remaining afterwards, and it's not as satisfying as Rise of the Tomb Raider was. Rise of the Tomb Raider had a great ending to where it made you want to play the next game in the series. This one just kind of has you wondering, where exactly are we going next in the series? So it's not like the worst story in a game that I've ever played, but it's not as fulfilling or satisfying as I would have liked it. However, the stealth gameplay and the tombs in this one are easily the best parts of the game. I love the tombs in this one. I love how the puzzles are way more, maybe not way more, but they're definitely more complex, and they require you to definitely think and check out the area a little bit more than what they were in past games, and it's way more fun because of it. And the underwater stuff, oh yes. It's one time in a game that I can think of where the underwater section doesn't suck your soul dry of all kind of optimism or fun. And the stealth gameplay is so good. It's so good, which it should be, considering that the same team that made the Deus Ex games, which are known for their stealth combat, made this game. So the stealth in this one is just really, really good. But unfortunately, the actual combat itself with the guns is not, it feels way more clunky than Rise of the Tomb Raider does. But all in all, if you enjoyed the past games, you'll enjoy this one. I would honestly rank the games in the new trilogy as Rise being number 1, Shadow being number 2, and then the first entry in the reboot series being number 3. So you take it for what it is, but I enjoyed it. I definitely want to play more of it. I'm going to be picking up the DLC as that comes out over the next couple months. So there's that. But as I alluded to earlier, or just mentioned, getting the Platinum Trophy for Rise of the Tomb Raider, I only have one trophy left, which is finish the game on Survivor difficulty, which found out is not that hard to do if you just play the game stealthy. And considering I just finished Shadow of the Tomb Raider, where all I did was stealth, this is kind of a cakewalk for me. And it's just so good. You know, Rise of the Tomb Raider is such a good game, man. Like,
yeah, solid ending also.
It's so good on so many levels. And it looks fantastic. That was one of the problems with Shadow of the Tomb Raider, is the graphics were inconsistent. There were parts where the game would look fantastic. There's other parts where the games would look like a PS3 game, and it's just kind of weird to me. So that's what it is.
I think that says something about the quality of those games. If the first one is the worst of the 3, the first one in the reboot was really good. And so it's like that sounds like a knock by being like, oh, it's the worst of the 3. But man, that game was really, really, really good also. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
I've been digging the reboot, no doubt.
Yeah,
I think it's just the climate that it has been released in. It's in the middle of Spider-Man and Red Dead, and that's just, I think it literally went on sale today. I think I saw.
Yeah.
So that's just not a great sign for sales and whatnot. But yeah, I'm gonna pick it up for sure at some point.
Oh yeah, and definitely I would.
If you think about it, Rise struggled with sales also though, because you had the year embargo with Xbox. And it sold like crap on Microsoft, on Xbox Store. And then when it got re-released with the 20th anniversary on PS4, that picked the sales back up. And a lot of people, I mean, that's when I got into it. And so the sales and the time frames that these games have been released in have not been helpful to Tomb Raider, but it doesn't indicate that those games have all been really good.
Yeah. I really think these games ought to start releasing in the summer, kind of when there's that drought, because I would have loved to have played Shadow of the Tomb Raider over the summer. I think that would have been a perfect time for it, but that's me. And dear listener, I don't want you to hear me say like Shadow of the Tomb Raider's hot garbage. It isn't hot garbage. It's just, it's got some rough edges, you know, as all games do. I will throw out this caveat though. This is the darkest entry in the series because it's dealing with Mayan culture, and Mayan culture by nature is dark with some of the stuff they do and delve into. So go into the game with that in mind if you're going to play it. It's going to be more intense than the last two were. So just keep that in mind. I don't want you to play the game if that's going to mess with your conscience and all that. But just do your due diligence, and do some research and check it out. I really enjoy the game. Like I said, if you enjoy the past games, you'll enjoy this one. And I'll end it there. But moving on to what have you been reading, brought to you by Dear VIP Gareth Evans. Micah, good sir, what have you been reading?
Well, I'm bringing an oldie to the table here, something that you guys originally recommended, whatever, at the beginning of the year. But 12 Ways Your Phone Is Changing You.
Oh, that too.
Yeah, 12 Ways Your Phone Is Changing You by Tony Reinke.
Good book.
Just started getting into it. My wife and I, we just read the introduction and preface and all that stuff, and read chapter 1, and already it's really, really good, really convicting. Actually, it's extremely convicting. Just the first chapter is on distractions, and just, oh my goodness, it's dude. Like so piercing. And it's just refreshing to have the perspective of Tony Reinke, to have someone who is tech savvy, but also gospel centered and that is the focus. So really good. I don't want to talk about it too long. You guys have already talked about how great this book is. I concur. 12 Ways Your Phone Is Changing You. Really, really good.
So good. I need to read it again, but I don't want to.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, no doubt.
Adam, what about you, man?
No doubt. I think I spoke about it a little bit last time. Finished Sex in a Broken World by Paul David Tripp. And so solid book. It's kind of not necessarily a theology of sex, but it kind of looks at sex, sexual identity, again, the sexual brokenness in our world. You know, we use the book Finally Free to deal with pornography.
That's another good
and
book.
Kind of that and masturbation and sin, and at the university here. I think that's a more focused book for that issue. But if you're wanting a more larger overview of like, okay, why is sex so jacked up in our society? Well, it's because of, and he kind of walks through that. So really helpful book, really good, a lot of good talking points. There's a lot of good questions at the end of every chapter. This was something we talked about when we were kind of reviewing the book as a staff with the guys. There in the beginning of every chapter, he's kind of giving some stories, anecdotal stories, kind of illustrations, but they're like real life illustrations, and they're good and they're helpful. But if you struggle with certain things, they could be hard to read. So in some ways, you could skip all of the intro to every chapter, and you're not really missing anything other than that kind of illustration part of it, like in a good sermon. But that was something, and now, again, by God's grace, being a person who I've never personally had a ton of struggles with like pornography and masturbation. That's by God's grace, not because of Adam. Adam's put himself in a lot of bad situations, but God's been very gracious in that. But so when reading some of that stuff, it wasn't maybe triggering things in my mind that someone who maybe has had that struggle might have triggers. So that's just kind of a caution. If you do read it, you'll notice after the first chapter, okay, maybe I need to skip the first couple pages of each chapter, or first page, and kind of get into the meat of the chapter instead of playing around with the illustrations. But really, really, really solid book. You know, recommend it. But Hannah and I have actually started listening. It's kind of I'm going to mention this later at the end of how we're doing this, but we're listening to the audiobook by Jackie Hope Perry called Gay Girl, Good God. And it is fantastic so far. It's about a 4.5 hour listen. We're listening at 1 1/4 speed, so it'll probably take us about 3 hours. And it's so far so good. She's kind of sharing her story, and if you've ever heard Jackie Hill Perry, she does a lot of spoken word stuff. So she reads her own audiobook, which makes it even better. So we're really enjoying that. So hopefully by the next, I don't know if we'll finish it by the next time we record, but just because we're listening to it together, But so far, so good. Again, that's gay girl, good guy. And if you know anything about Jackie Hull's story, former homosexual, God saves her, changes her life. Really, really awesome story of God's work. So that's what I'm reading / listening to.
Awesome. Did she write another book called This Changes Everything, dealing with youth ministry and stuff like that?
I don't think so.
I'll have to look that up. That name sounds very familiar.
I think this is her first book. She does a lot of speaking.
Okay.
But I don't think she has done any other writing. And she doesn't necessarily she does a lot of spoken word ministry. I don't think she does like youth ministry or any of that.
Okay. I'll have to look into that one then.
She speaks at like Gospel Coalition. She speaks at a lot of those type conferences. She's awesome. If you haven't heard of her, look her up, hear her story. She's fantastic.
I'll check her out. Not like check her out, but like, you know what I mean. Check out the content that she produced. Gosh, I'm so weird on this episode. So as far as what I've been reading, I've been reading a book called Down, Not Out by Chris Cipollone, I think is how you say his last name. I'm not entirely sure. It's basically a book. The tagline says depression, anxiety, and the difference Jesus makes. Just because longtime listeners know that's a topic that I'm very interested in, especially as one that really wrestles with anxiety himself. And I'm not going to lie, so far, I'm really digging the book. I'm about a quarter of the way, almost halfway through. And I like how the book is structured. Each chapter is just a couple of pages, but it's like a stick of dynamite, really. It's a few page numbers, but there's a lot of stuff in there, and it's really, really good. And it's written in that way, so that way you can take it however you want to consume the content. If you want to read a couple pages a day, you can do that. If you just want to read one chapter, you can do that. If you want to read like 3 chapters in a week, you can do that. It's all on you, and it's structured in a way that really kind of lends itself well to that. And I wanted to read just a few excerpts from the book itself when it's talking about gospel identity, which is this identity that was really kind of goes back into what Colossians 3 talks about, how our life is hidden with Christ and what that means and that kind of victory that we have. So he says here that in the gospel, we have victory over sin, death, and the devil. This victory is achieved for us through Christ's death and resurrection in spite of our own sin. This truth leads us to rightly conclude that God loves us more than we could imagine. When we experience dark times and feel as though God doesn't care, we must come back to the fact that he has not even spared his own son in pursuit of us. And then he quotes 1 John 3, verse 1. It says, "See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God," and that is what we are. And then at the end of each chapter, he has a thing to just kind of reflect on that says, "The beauty of the gospel is that even at our lowest, we are more than our illness. If we are in Christ, then our identity is secure in him. This helps us to process and grow through all seasons." Then he continues to build on that throughout the book. And so for me, it's just some of the stuff is very Christianity 101, but again, it's stuff that we tend to forget the quickest as Christians. And it's been very refreshing for me to read that. And it's kind of lent itself well to this study that I've been taking my students through called Reflect, where we're talking about who we are as human beings. What does it mean to be created in the image of God? And we're going to be talking about idols this week and how that, like when we put our identity in something else, then it can be removed. But if we put our identity in Christ, that's eternal. It can't ever be taken away. And I had this kind of cool epiphany moment when I was teaching my students that last week, where, you know, I was talking about the gospel and how we don't do anything to earn our salvation. And I'm like, well, if we don't do anything to earn our salvation, that doesn't really mean we can't do anything to lose it either, because it's a gift, you know. And it's kind of one of those moments where you're studying the word and you've read that passage several times, but then God kind of opens up your eyes to this other facet of it, and it's just mind-blowing stuff. So that, again, is Down, Not Out, a book about depression, anxiety, and the difference Jesus makes. So there you go, dear listeners. You can check that out, read it for yourself. It's a fairly short read, but I'm taking my time through it, partially because I have no time, but also because I find myself reading these books at a slower pace. I tend to get more out of it. So there you go, dear listeners. Hopefully that is an encouragement to some of you out there. But moving along, let's get into our topic of the show, which is Spider-Man, the latest game by Insomniac Games on the PS4, brought to you by David Skinner. So real quick, as we always do with these sections, in case you're new to the show for whatever reason, we will talk about kind of the development history of the game, talk about its reception, give a short review, spoiler-free, of what we think of the game, and then just kind of leave you with that. And no, I'm kidding. We actually dive deep into the game. I'm losing it today. But we'll talk about the game. Like I said, we'll give you spoiler warnings at the appropriate points. So that way, if you haven't played the game yet, or you're at a certain point in the game and you don't want other things spoiled, that's going to be your opportunity to jump out of the episode, to hit pause, go play the game, finish it, do whatever, and then come back to this episode. It's not going anywhere. This episode will stay on your phone or whatever device you're using to listen to it. So, just real quick on the development history. We see here Marvel approached Sony Interactive Entertainment about wanting them to publish a Marvel game. Sony discussed that Insomniac Games would be a good... No, Sony discussed with Insomniac Games which Marvel property they thought would be a good idea for them to adapt, and they both agreed on Spider-Man. Let me see here... the game was announced during Sony's E3 2016 press conference on June 13th. It was the first in a series of games made by Insomniac and Sony and marked the start of Marvel Games' new strategy to work with the best game companies who are passionate about their characters, and maybe hint at a Marvel video game universe, but we'll see how that works. In April 2017, Ryan Penagos, Vice President and Executive Editor, Marvel Digital Media, stated that the game would be released in 2017. We all know that didn't happen. At Sony's E3 2017 conference, the first gameplay demo was shown, and it was announced that the game would be released in 2018. The game went gold on July 30th, 2018, and was released on September 7th of this year. And then, of course, they released a PlayStation 4 Pro bundle, which looks quite fantastic with that red and the spider logo on there. Yuri Lowenthal is the voice and physical actor for Spider-Man in the game. In early 2015, Lowenthal gained the role after some initial pushback within Insomniac due to him voicing one of the main playable characters for Insomniac's most recently released game at the time, Sunset Overdrive. But ultimately, the game's lead writer, John Paquette, convinced the studio to cast him in the role due to his trust in Lowenthal's acting ability. Lowenthal worked with two stunt people throughout the game's development. He tried to differentiate between his voices for Peter Parker and Spider-Man and Spider-Cop, but thought that they could not be totally different, and as a result, spent a large amount of time finessing and massaging his performance to achieve a balance. John Paquette, Christos Gage, my apologies, Ben Arfman, and Dan Slott wrote the game's script, which hopefully some of those names sound familiar to you, dear listeners, if you are reading the comics. Dan Slott has been a longtime writer on the Spider-Man comics for several years now, while John Pisano composed its original score, which, in my opinion, fantastic score. It literally felt like Spider-Man anytime I heard the music on there. As far as reception goes for the game, it got a lot of critical acclaim, receiving 9s, 10s through different outlets. Mike Minotti of VentureBeat called it the best Spider-Man game and one of the best superhero games ever, while Game Informer's Andrew Rayner wrote, like Batman Arkham Asylum before it, Spider-Man raises the bar for one of the world's most beloved heroes. Josh Harmon of EGM Now called the web swinging an absolute blast, described it as a more streamlined version of the physics-based system used in Spider-Man 2, while Game Revolution's Jason Falker praised it as fantastic, and I'm not sure if any game has quite captured the feeling of speed and movement quite like this one before. It's just so consistently good, which is something that the game was praised for, as well as the game's visuals. Story received a lot of positive reviews, saying it's the best Spider-Man story around. Needless to say, the game has just been very well received. Let me see here. The game grossed, as far as sales go, the game grossed an estimated $198 million worldwide in the same time frame of I skipped a part. The game went on to sell 3.3 million copies in the first 3 days of its release. 3.3 million copies in just 3 days of its release, a record as the fastest selling first party video game release in Sony Interactive Entertainment's history, narrowly beating the newly released God of War, which was released just 5 months prior. The game grossed an estimated $198 million worldwide in the same time frame, surpassing the $117 million domestic opening weekend box office of the 2017 film Spider-Man: Homecoming. Needless to say, the game's great. It's selling real well. A lot of people love it. It's doing good. But the only opinion that matters is ours. So,
basically,
Micah, man, what do you think about Spider-Man? I know you wrote that article on our website about why I love Spider-Man. Fantastic stuff, dear listeners. Go check that out. But, dude, it's just real brief. Like, I don't know how brief is. But, man, what Spider-Man? Is it good? Is it not good? What makes it great? Should people play it?
I love the character of Spider-Man. I love the character of Peter Parker. Nothing against Miles Morales, but the way that Insomniac, and really just everyone, Marvel, the way they handled this version was just perfect for me. When it comes to the performances, I think that's the thing that I think of the most. The facial capture, just the acting. You mentioned Yuri Lowenthal, I believe, the main voice actor for Peter, just knocked it out of the park. I was on board from the opening scene, opening dialogue. It's just it's such a well thought out story and plot. There's a lot of characters they introduce in this game. Or not introduce, they're known quantities, but they have a lot of characters in this game, and they tie them all together really well. I think there's not a lot of wasted sort of screen time, so to speak, and so that's the first thing that jumps out is just the overall plot and the performances of the actors, and just the way that Insomniac was able to capture their facial animations. Good grief, it was so good. That's like, God of War and some other recent games have had great facial animation, and I think technically speaking, Spider-Man is probably inferior, but the facial animations look absolutely stunning. I was loving all that about it.
Right on. Adam, man, what'd you think of Spider-Man?
I mean, you feel like Spider-Man when you're playing the game. We talked about it kind of when me and Clay did the episode, but I mean, it's got the feel. There's nothing like you just want to have people over and say, "Hey, take this controller. It's intuitive. It's easy. Okay, this is what does this. This is what does that." And then you just enjoy swinging around the city. I love the way that they progress your abilities, and that and this was something I was talking with. I let a kid borrow the game. There's not really any boss fights at the beginning, and I mean there's some kind of minor ones here and there, but you don't really have a boss fight until the very end of the game in many ways. And I, he made the point of this of like, well, you're not fully Spider-Man until the end of the game. You don't have all your gadgets. You don't have all of your moves. You haven't really unlocked all the skills. So I thought that it was, because for a while I'm like, yeah, you get some harder enemies here and there, ones with the sword that's kind of like a little mini boss there for a minute, but you can still, with your powers and stuff like that, your specials, take them out relatively easy. And so I thought that was a cool way they did that of where, all right, when you're finally ready for the Sinister Six, you've probably got all of your stuff unlocked for the most part. And so I thought that was brilliant. It really made you feel powerful like Spider-Man. In the beginning, you've got your fighting abilities and you've got your web shooter, but you can't really do a lot. You don't I feel like a dumbed down version of Spider-Man, but man, by the end, I'm doing all the crimes that we were talking about pre-show, which can kind of be kind of be one of the grindy things. But when I'm doing those, I'm approaching each one differently. It's kind of like that's the point where I'm like, all right, I'm just trying out different specials because I know even if the special doesn't work for me, I've got gadget, and I'm taking them all down. So, I mean, it's the gameplay. Again, at the beginning, it can feel button mashy, but again, towards the end of the game, I knew what I was doing with every move. It wasn't just button mashing. I was being strategic of throwing stuff at people, electrocuting them, shooting them with the one like the web explosion, and then using my shockwave to push them up against walls, push them off of buildings. So the gameplay, along with the acting and the story was, and we'll get into it, was fine. I'm not gonna act like it's the best story I've ever played in a game compared to even like a God of War. I think that story is still way better than Spider-Man's, but that doesn't mean that Spider-Man's wasn't solid. It was a solid story, but that was kind of one of its. Again, it just took a while. I think the way they end it, you kind of, and again, I don't want to get into spoilers, but with Miles, like that was pretty awesome. But yeah, that's kind of some of my initial thoughts. Is like, man, the game was. Again, I think I finished 90% of it. I didn't go through and finish all the crimes, but other than that, I did all the challenges and whatnot, and it's a great game.
Right on. I'm actually gonna be the one to say that I think the story in this game is better than God of War's, and I don't know how much of that is not necessarily nostalgia, but like similar to that, I would say, because I've grown up with this character. I've grown up with these characters. And so I have a more deeper connection with these characters and some of the things they go through. And what more is there to say about this game? It's so much fun to play. It's so much fun to just pick your favorite Spider-Man suit, except the symbiote suit. I don't know why they didn't put that in the game, but it's so much fun to put your favorite suit in the game, just put that on, swing around the city, and just hang out, just exist in that world. And then when a crime thing pops up on the map, you swing in like Spider-Man, take out the bad guys, save the day, and then you go fight Vulture a couple times or whoever decides to show up. And it's just, it's like what that one reviewer said. It's a lot like playing Batman Arkham Asylum for the first time, where you're thinking, man, this is what superhero games should feel like. It should feel like this, where you feel like that character and you see all the other characters in their rogues gallery coming in, and they're all just so on point perfection that you can't help but just want to keep playing. And like I said earlier, the music in the game fits perfectly. A lot of the scenes that have the different music, where I don't know how to really get into it without getting into spoilers at this point, but the music is very fitting for this kind of game. It's tense when it needs to be. It's energetic when it needs to be. It's somber when it needs to be. And just the performances all around are just so good. And Yuri Lowenthal, I think, nailed it as Peter Parker. There's moments where you see him trying to just help people and just be heartfelt. And it's just so endearing. It's so endearing. And they totally got the character of Peter Parker and Spider-Man just absolutely perfect. There's one scene in particular that I'm thinking of that's actually on our YouTube channel, where he runs into Miles for the first time and as Spider-Man. And that whole scene is just, it brought a couple tears to my eye, because I'm like, you know what? Spider-Man would do that. He would take his time out of his day to just encourage someone to I'm tearing up thinking about it. All that to say, dear listeners, if you have yet to play this game for whatever reason, go play it. So good. That being said, let's get into spoiler territory, because I want to talk about this game more in depth. So, dear listeners, if you have yet to play this game, or if you're playing it and you don't want anything spoiled, this is your point where you pause the podcast, go play the game, and then come back to it. So, again, spoilers, at this point, if you're still listening and anything gets spoiled, I don't want to hear it. You can't hit us up on Twitter and the Facebook and be like, you guys spoiled the game for me, because we gave you plenty of time to turn away from the episode and from getting spoilers. That being said, guys, without further ado, let's jump into Spider-Man, discuss some of the themes, discuss some of the more spoilery stuff. Where do we want to start exactly? I know I put some stuff in the notes here to kind of give us a guide, but we can really go anywhere at this point.
Logan, I like the first point you have in here, Spider-Man's selfless demeanor.
Yes. Let's talk about
Going
it.
back to what I was saying with how I felt like Insomniac and again just all the writers that are involved, they're Marvel writers too. They nailed that aspect of Peter and how Peter's always juggling stuff. He's always got too much on his plate to do. He can't go do that thing with Mary Jane and also go stop this random crime that's happening while also going to stop the major crime that's happening or whatever. He's got too much on his plate. So he's always having to sacrifice something or he's always losing out in some sort of way. And that oftentimes feeds into I don't know. He wants to do everything.
Yeah,
he wants to be there for Mary Jane for that, or he wants to go stop that random crime or that mugging, and he feels stretched thin, and that's part of Peter. That's part of his character. He wouldn't be great if he had it all together. So I thought that they handled his character with care, and that's like I said, that's probably one of my favorite things about the game in general. So yeah, his selfless character is great.
Now,
yeah, and I think go ahead, Logan.
I was gonna say this is one thing where I actually kind of wanted to discuss a little bit, and you set it up perfectly there with how he's really trying to do a little bit of everything. He's trying to be Spider-Man. He's trying to maintain a social life. He's trying to work. He's trying to take care of people. I often wonder sometimes, like, when does this guy sleep exactly? And I think I'm more cognizant of that because I finished reading The Art of Rest by Adam Mabry. I talked about that a couple episodes ago. And, we as Christians, I think we just in America, we have this mindset of our value is based on how much we get done in a day. And that leads to us really kind of overexerting ourselves. And I kind of see that happening with Peter Parker a little bit with how he's either always late to something or he's got so much going on. And so I kind of wanted to look at that and discuss if that's really such a good quality for him to have. Now, I understand he's a superhero. He's got a lot of responsibilities. A lot of times he's really the only person that can do this. But is his desire to really try to help everyone, is that such a good thing in how he goes about it?
Well, there's even a neat little throwaway line, almost a small little, as you're walking through Feast, the food shelter, a place that Aunt May works at. He has some line once he's been busy, and he's like, "Wow, have I not slept?" or something like that. He's like, "Man, I should really take better care of myself." I think that's literally a line he says.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't really have a point, but I thought that was funny that he does sort of call it out in himself that, yeah, maybe I should get more rest. I really haven't slept in like a full day, or something like that.
So he's even aware of it.
I mean, I think and you can look at the game in the way that whenever you kind of hit the break point, it's not like he doesn't say like, again, in a video game, there's not going to be like necessarily a rest function. Like That's just not how video games work. But it's like, oh, you've got a break, go solve more crimes, go level up your suit, go get more skills. And so it's like, even in the way that they build the game, it's like the nonstop action, which again, like you said, kind of in that book, it's kind of commentary to the culture we live in, where if you're not 100% busy your full day, people are going to accuse you of wasting your time.
Yeah.
Now, you find that in America. I've been blessed to live overseas, and that's not how we functioned over there. I tried as I was in this current job. I was at the beginning of the year. I'm like, you know what? If I ever start a conversation with someone, just kind of walking around, I want to stop and sit in that moment for a minute. Mm-hmm. And like, if that means I'm running late to another meeting, if it means that I have to cancel a meeting, so be it. But it's so hard to live that way when you're the only one doing it, because then you look disrespectful.
Mm.
Then you look like you don't care. Then you're just being either, you're again lazy, whatever you want to, untimely. You just look like not a good person. And so that's kind of a commentary to how, whether it's Spider-Man or our lives, like we want to fill our day with as much as possible, because then we wear busyness as a pin of pride.
Yeah.
Of, I'm so busy, I can't add anything to my schedule, because in Spider-Man and Peter Parker kind of doing the same thing of, he's got feet. I mean, that's kind of why him and MJ to a degree don't work out up to a point. They're not good teammates. And I think going along with that is, not only are they not good teammates, but he's got so much on his plate, he can't do anything really well. You can't solve all the crime in the world. You can't, or in the city. You can't do everything you need to do at Feast. You can't take care of May the way you want to. You can't take care of MJ the one. But you may be getting stuff done, but as I tell students all the time, anytime you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And Peter Parker as Spider-Man is a perfect example of that. Of, as soon as he says yes to Feast, he's no longer serving the community and fighting crime. As soon as he says yes to fighting crime, he's now saying no to May, to MJ, to Feast, to whatever thing, rest, going into what you're talking about. And with that, where the heck are the Avengers? You've got the city
right.
being destroyed. You're climbing on Avengers Tower, but where the heck? Get this man some help.
Yeah.
Like, I know he's your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man solving all these minor crimes all over the place, but once we got Doc Ock and everybody attacking, someone throw this man a bone and give him some help.
Yeah. That's what I thought too. I was ready for Iron Man to come flying in at one point, and then he never did. And I was like, "What? I just climbed the top of the dude's tower. Where was he at?"
Surprised there's not a cameo.
Yeah.
Surprised there's not a cameo of any other Avenger throughout the game.
Yeah, it's weird, and I think this kind of resonated more with me a little bit too, because I mean, when you get into ministry just of any capacity, and you start, meeting people and engaging and building relationships, you kind of get that way where you want to help as much as you can, but you kind of have to come to a point where you realize that there's only so much you can do in that moment, and really when you take a break or just rest, you're kind of, that's a form of worship, because you're surrendering to God's sovereignty and knowing that He is still working even when you're not, And I guess this would be different for Spider-Man, because there's a lot more craziness going on that he has to deal with. But I found it interesting that he's just so busy all the time, and he just never really has any time for himself, save for the times in the game itself where it says, "Hey, nothing's really going on. Go hang out in the city or do whatever, have a little siesta." But just the way that he kind of carries himself, I caught that and was like, I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing to model after, but at the same time, he deals with a lot of different problems that I deal with. His biggest threat is this guy with robotic limbs trying to destroy the city, and my biggest problem is my dog chewing up my socks. So, I mean, it is what it is. But, dear listeners, maybe you can kind of chime in on that and give us your thoughts on that particular point there, and let us know what you think. So let's do this, because we talked about his selfless demeanor and how he wants to help everyone, and we're kind of getting into this maybe a little bit earlier than what I anticipated. But the end of the game, when was it Doc Ock? Yeah, when Doc Ock releases the virus to New York, Aunt May gets sick, and Peter only has enough of an antidote he has a decision to make. He can either use that antidote to cure Aunt May in that moment, but then everybody else that's sick is going to die because they'll be out of it, or he can let Aunt May die so that they can have enough time to really build enough of an antidote to make more and then save everybody else. And gosh, this scene is going to make me cry just thinking about it. Mm-hmm. He has this moment with Aunt May, which is it just fits within Spider-Man. When he's standing at the side of her bed, and she says, take off the mask. I want to see my nephew one more time. And so he takes his mask off and he's like, you knew? And she's like, I've known for a while. And I'm like, of course she would. Of course she would. She's family. She would notice these things. But he's just, you see him being just, feel so defeated. And he says, I don't know what to do. And she says, yes, you do. And you see him about to take the antidote and plug it into Aunt May's machine to heal her. And he stops and he's just, and this goes back to what you said earlier, Micah, about the facial animations. You see that conflict in his face where he is fighting himself on so many levels of what to do. Because he wants to say, it's a hard scene. He wants to save his Aunt May because she has been there for him through so much, and he even talks about that with her at an earlier portion of the game. But he knows that if he does this, he's letting everybody else die. And so he holds back, Aunt May passes away, and everybody else is saved because of that one sacrifice. What is that quote that Aunt May says in the game? You help one person, you help everybody, or something like that?
Yeah, something like that.
Something to that effect. What do you guys think about that scene? Because I feel like there's a lot that we could dig out of that particular. Adam, let's kick it to you, man. That particular scene there, man. How can we look at that from a biblical worldview?
Well, I think again in a culture where what is the decision that is best for me? And if you look at Peter Parker, for him, the best decision for Peter Parker would be to save his Aunt May. But in a very, looking at shadows and biblical truth, that's not necessarily the way that the Bible preaches. It talks about, it does speak about going out and seeking out the one, but there's also this decision of God gave up his one to save the lot. He gave up his one son to provide forgiveness and repentance and salvation to the world. And so I think we can see some of that where, again, not perfect. So again, I'm not comparing. Peter Parker is not a Christ figure by any means, but that idea of sacrifice that we usually, in most good video games, we're finding a strong element of sacrifice somewhere. You're not getting to save the world. You're not getting to beat the bad guy unless there's usually been some level of heavy cost sacrifice. And again, I think we see that even in our own personal lives. We're not living for the Lord, most likely. Again, if our God had to give up the greatest sacrifice, we're going to have to sacrifice something in our lives. And so again, in this game, for him to be able to save the city and to be able to, again, he could have said, I'm going to look out for me. I need my Aunt May. But, in the same way that he needed his Aunt May, there's a lot of people that needed X, Y, and Z in their life. And so for her to both selflessly say, hey, you know what you got to do, and for him to have to deal with that, man, I mean, again, how that is going to affect him going even forward of what sacrifice, again, knowing that Miles is kind of, okay, what does Peter Parker's story look like going forward? Because there's going to be that big moment of potential personal sacrifice that doesn't involve even just his Aunt May, but him personally. And I think she painted a great picture of what that looks like for him moving forward.
Yeah. Micah, what do you think, man?
I was thinking about that line, he delivers it, Yuri Lowenthal delivers it so well. I don't know what to do. And he falls to his knees and he clutches Aunt May's hand on the side of the bed. And just sort of, I don't know, I think about it sometimes with like going to a funeral for someone who's lost, and just sort of that hopelessness there. And, sort of contrasting that to the hope we have in Christ. And looking at Peter and just, I was sitting there, in tears in my eyes watching this scene, and I'm like, he is hopeless right now, and it's just a heavy, weighty scene. And it makes you extremely glad of the hope we have in Christ. And just to see him broken, that was a broken man, in that scene. And, even the scene that followed up at Aunt May's funeral, they're all dressed in black at the gravesite, and just like, what could be going through Peter's head right now. What sort of things, what sort of lies are the devil feeding him right now? I know that it's a fictional character, whatever, but I mean, it's still things that I think about, and just being grateful that if we hit, in real life hit situations like that, we have someone to lean on and someone to take refuge in. And just seeing that scene is just really kind of, it makes me heartbroken for Peter as a character. And there's another scene too toward the end of the game when I guess he just defeated Doc Ock, and Doc Ock says, "Why did you turn on me, Peter?" He's like, "Turn? I didn't turn. I worshipped you." And just all these, just the things that Peter put his hope in, but that they put his hope in, and he wanted to be a great scientist to help the world, like Otto Octavius, and just seeing that all those misplaced aspirations and hope and stuff is it's just a good, I guess, exposition to see in a sort of a carefree game like this.
Yeah, kind of a cautionary tale almost to a degree. So let's talk about Otto Octavius a little bit, and really even Mr. Negative as well. Kind of their driving force in the game is revenge against Norman Osborn, and you really see the kind of corrupting effect that has on both of them, to the point where I honestly didn't know Doc Ock was even in this game. Like, I knew Otto Octavius was in the game, but I didn't know he would become Doc Ock in this game. Mm-hmm. So what do you guys think about, I mean, were those two kind of justified in their pursuit for, really they were trying to pursue justice for the way that Norman Osborn kind of screwed both of them over, and now he's the mayor of the city. They want to see him brought to justice, but it's that thing where, at least when I saw it, I'm like, I get that you guys want justice, and I think you guys deserve justice, but the way you're going about it is completely wrong, and it makes me not even want to listen to your side because they're resorting to violence, and I don't know. Let's kick it back to Micah and then Adam. Well, I mean, what do you guys think about that whole ordeal between Mr. Negative and Otto and Norman?
I think it's interesting that for the most part, Peter doesn't really know all the, I guess he does for Mr. Negative, but he doesn't really see all the horrors that is Norman Osborn, because he's friends with Harry. Him, Harry and Mary Jane have, they're great friends and stuff. So he just kind of thinks of them as the mayor and Harry's dad for the majority of the game. I think it'll be interesting to see. It would be nice to see Peter learn more about that and see how he does react now that he knows what Otto knew and those sort of things. Obviously, Mr. Negative's case for revenge is that's a pretty chilling tale, what happened to him. I won't go into all the details of what happened to him with Norman and everything, but that's I mean, I think they're pretty similar, honestly, Mr. Negative and Doc Ock, about honestly how they go about doing it. They both obviously are out to get Norman, which you're almost sort of kind of rooting for in some ways, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting kind of how it's sort of Peter's perspective of it all, of how he doesn't really see it for the most part in most of the game, but these two guys are clearly driven.
Yeah. And I think, well, it kind of flows out to, I kind of added a short note in there. It's like, it's revenge, but it's kind of starts with how are they responding to tragedy? They've experienced tragic events, and even you look at, okay, Peter and Miles also are responding to some tragic events, but how they go about that is just very drastically different. And so you've got, I mean, you look at Miles, who experiences this tragedy, and his response, while there's some mourning and some grief and some trauma there, his is, I'm going to try to do better, do good. I'm going to try to live up to the family name in some ways, and he gets involved at feasts. Then you have Doc and Lee, and they go through these traumatic experiences, these tragedies, And because of their response to that, it turns into that revenge. And again, I think as we look at tragedy in our lives, I think how we deal with tragedy will, again, and how we view justice. There's God talking about He is the one that's going to bring justice. And so as much as we want to seek, we can seek that, and we should pursue that in the proper channels. In the end, I'm not the one that needs to be going out and putting that in my own. If someone has done something horrible to me, say one of the worst things, if someone murders one of my wife, for me to seek justice is not to go out and murder that person myself. I need to seek it through the proper channels, but God doesn't call me to seek that. It calls me to trust Him and to rely on Him and believe that He is going to bring the proper justice, and whether that's on this earthly world or in the future, in eternity. And so you have these characters who say, no, the only way justice can happen is if I take it into my hands and I don't care about the collateral damage. Like, look at the collateral damage that Lee or Mr. Negative brings by the choices he makes. It's like, not only are your choices, I think this is another good lesson, not only do your choices when you seek revenge affect you, but they have massive ripples. Like, the whole city is affected because one man seeking revenge against another man. And that's why I think as we look at tragedy, even in our personal lives, and trying to, again, seek counsel and seek justice, relying on the Lord, because what we may think is best, again, we don't see the full picture. We don't see the full story. And so we may be approaching something from a justice standpoint from our perspective, but that may be causing major collateral damage to others that are not as involved or aren't involved. And so, so just how we respond to tragedy. Do we get bitter in our heart? And I like what Micah said earlier. Because of our hope in the Lord, we can respond to tragedy even differently than the world does. We have an aspect of hope. We have an aspect of God's sovereignty of, I don't know why this has happened, and it hurts and it sucks, but I still have a trust and a hope in the Lord that others don't have. And so I'm going to wait, and hopefully if God will show me why this has happened, but if He doesn't, that's okay. He's still worthy of my trust, whether I know why He did it or not. So,
yeah. And I think there's even something to be said about, I think this is in 1 Peter, I could be wrong, that just says to be sober-minded and alert, for the devil prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. And really, in those moments of tragedy, you're completely vulnerable. Micah, you said this earlier with how, Peter's sitting there at Aunt May's funeral, and you're just wondering, like, what exactly is going on in his head right now. And that's the thing. In those moments, it's super easy to get bitter and angry and to want justice. And the desire for justice isn't a bad desire, but it's in those moments too where I'm sure you're going to ask, where was God in all of this? Where was He?
The other thing too about justice, the thing about justice is that, I think that for the Christian, you need to be okay with being wronged, and you're not necessarily going to get justice on this earth, of any shape. Yeah. So, I think, I think having that, sort of turn the other cheek mentality, to where, life is unfair, and nowhere in the Bible did it say that it would be, or that you would have justice by the time you die in your life, for all situations. This is it's just it's not something that the Christian should expect, so why should you seek it so adamantly necessarily, Yeah.
No, I would even, kind of add to this is just like, in those moments, it's like, I know the desire for justice gets strong, and when we don't get it, we feel wronged, or we feel like God is wronging us. But it's one of those things that is easier said than done, but you kind of have to take out of that emotion a little bit and really go back to what Scripture says about God. If you look at the book of Psalms, David's in there all the time saying, God, how much longer are you going to let these people that are just wicked and evil just run rampant? Why are you not doing something about that? But then at the very end of those Psalms, he always goes back, but I'm going to trust in you. You know what you're doing. You're good. You're wise. I'll put my trust in you. And I had another thing I was going to add, but I can't remember what it is. But it's in those moments where just because you're going through a tragedy or a season of where it's just kind of a low point in your life, that doesn't change who God is, the fact that he is there. It's just, there's certain situations that you can't really let your emotions be your Bible. Exactly. You got to rely on what the truth is said. And all that to say, and then here's the other thing I was going to add. When it comes to Mr. Negative and Otto, they didn't really, at when those tragedies were fresh, when those things just happened, they didn't really have anyone that they could turn to. Whereas you see Peter had Aunt May. He had MJ. When Miles goes through his own tragedy in the game, Peter shows up for him. Spider-Man shows up for him. Aunt May is there for him. You see him get connected, and it's just, it makes me think of how we ought to be as the church and bearing one another's burdens and just mourning with those who mourn, weeping with those who weep, and just strengthening each other, because that can make all the difference in someone's life. From you never know. You being there for someone could get them through their day, get them through. I mean, we don't know what each other's going through, but I feel like I've gone off on a rabbit trail at this point. But it's something to think about in regards to this, because when it's like what Adam said, when you get so consumed with something, I mean, it doesn't just affect you anymore. It affects everyone around you. It has long-reaching ripple effects. It's something you have to consider. But even we as Christians, I think we should be a little aware of that too, and loving on those people. You know, it's nice that we say things on Facebook, you know, for someone like, oh, praying for you, but it's a whole other thing to actually show up, to be there, to support each other. Am I making sense at this point, or am I kind of doggy paddling in the water here, not really doing all that?
Yeah, all that makes sense.
Okay, cool. Well, dear listeners, you guys let us know what you think on that. We're kind of running short on time here, but guys, let us know what you think. If you played the game, give us your thoughts on all these topics. Let us know maybe some other things in the game that you saw that you'd like to discuss. Let's keep the discussion rolling on this one here. But before we let you go, you know, as always, some recos brought to you by Dear VIP Eric Bryant. Micah, man, what should the dear listeners check out?
Well, I wanted to bring something. This show is so cool. This is another podcast, another video game related podcast. It's called this is a mouthful, so it's the AIAS Game Maker's Notebook. So the AIAS is the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences. It's essentially the Ted Price, the CEO of Insomniac Games, sits down with one-on-one interviews with awesome game developers, and it is fantastic. I think it comes out every other week or maybe once a month, but recent guests in the past year have been Todd Howard, Neil Druckmann, Ed Boon, Corey Barlog, Tim Schafer, Jeff Kaplan, director over at Blizzard of Overwatch, Genova Chen from Journey, all sorts, just some heavy hitters, and plus some smaller guys. Ashraf Ismail, I think his name. I think I got that right. The Assassin's Creed Origins director. Some great talent in there, and they just talk shop about making games, and it is very fascinating. If you have any interest in game development at all, even just not, I mean, talking about making games, just you have interest from like a hobbyist perspective, you know, like I do or something. It is fascinating. It's about an hour and 20 minutes. They'll just sit down and just talk, and it is fantastic. Ted Price is a really great interviewer. They get into some really interesting conversations. So it's the AIAS Game Maker's Notebook podcast. Check it out.
Right on. Adam, man, what should they check out?
Me and Michael were talking about this a little bit pre-show. I mentioned it. So Hannah and I are listening to this book by Jackie Hill Perry, Gay Girl, Good God. But we're actually doing this through an app called the Hoopla, Hoopla. It connects with your local library, so you need to go to your local library and get a membership and a membership card. But you connect to this app, you put in your library, your number, and then it's got all of these online resources that you can get right from your phone. So you can listen to audiobooks. They've got at least, I don't know if it's different per library. I think if you just have a participating library, you should have access to all the same stuff. But it's got all these Christian audiobooks. So like Russell Moore's new book, Storm-Tossed Family. I was just putting in book searching. You can get audiobooks, Kindle, movies, TV shows, CDs, and you kind of check them out. But you can kind of check them out for, I think, 25 days at a time. But then you can always re-up it. So definitely something worth checking out if you've got like, Audible. This might be something that could save you, $5-10 a month, depending on what books you're wanting to listen to, or save you some money from buying Kindle books. You can just check them out right through this app. So again, Hoopla, Hoopla. Check it out.
Right on. Dear listeners, I'm going to echo one of Adam's recos from a couple episodes ago. That is the show Atypical on Netflix. Me and wifey just started watching season 2, and well, I can't get into it because, some of you haven't seen season 1, but great show. Really great show. Again, it's going to deal with some mature themes in there, but I think it's such an eye-opening experience watching this show and seeing how a family really interacts with their child who is on the spectrum. And I think it'll help, especially if you deal with students, like if you deal in youth ministry or if you work at a school. I think it'll help you out immensely just having just some kind of idea of what it is certain students go through on a day-to-day basis. And it's funny, lots of laughs, lots of heartbreaking moments, but really good show. Really good show. It's on Netflix. So if you have that, use your subscription to check that show out. Micah, good sir, again, thank you for joining us on this episode to help us talk about Spider-Man. It's always a joy to have our patrons on. Yeah, man. So dear listeners, real quick, as always, if you would like to contact us, or if you like what we do here at the show, why not head over to patreon.com/thereformedgamers to consider lending your support to the show, helping us keep the lights on, the controllers charged, and the coffee hot so we can get our platinum trophies. That again is patreon.com/thereformedgamers. Also, you can check us out on YouTube and Twitch. YouTube is youtube.com/thereformedgamers. And then Twitch is twitch.tv/TRG podcast. Tend to go live at very random points throughout the week, sometimes on the weekend, sometimes Monday evening. You always want to hit the follow button so you always know when we go live. But if for some reason you miss out on those streams, subscribe to us and hit the bell icon over on YouTube so that way you can always be up to date on our Twitch stream archives and new episodes of the podcast. You can also head over to the website, thereformedgamers.wordpress.com, to check out articles like Micah's on why I love Spider-Man and show notes for the shows and all sorts of fun stuff like that over there on thereformedgamers.wordpress.com. As always, you can follow us on Twitter at TRG Podcast. You can also like us on Facebook, and you can join our Facebook group. It just depends on what kind of level of interactivity you want with the podcast. If you just want the updates on the show, like us on Facebook. If you want to interact with the community, join the Facebook group and have some fun in there. But until next time, dear listeners, GG and amen.